Benchmarking. You all walk in the room, I hope not, thinking that I'm going to tell you what the cost of production is in the industry and what good and bad is. I'm going to wander around it a lot, but I'm not going to get exactly on it. And the biggest reason I'm not going to get on it is grain prices, right? Iowa's a positive basis. State of Iowa right now, last night, USDA report, Iowa's positive 2-cent corn basis statewide. Sioux County's about 40 cents positive. Historic is minus 34. When did you buy corn? Did you buy corn on a basis contract or on a fixed price contract? Yeah. So I'm going to show you some numbers, but don't hold me to them at all. And I'm going to start differently than benchmarking. I do this a lot with the grower meetings I do and that. I'm going to give you some little tips that I run across in barns that make life a lot simpler for everyone involved, and especially on record keeping. We're going to see a surge coming up again of new barn construction. We had some last year, end of the year, when the drought hit. We had cancellation in finishing barns. Still a pent-up demand. Hearing lots of stories of potential barns coming. And the challenge you face with growers in barns and stuff is what? They've got many times a little office where the controllers are. And yep, someday I'm going to get a desk in there. And it always sits on the floor, right? You walk in, I'm looking at Paul Yeski, you walk in the barn and what's sitting on the floor? Syringes on the floor next to some drugs and whatever. And they're supposed to keep logs for the production company. In a case like this one, why not just put a little shelf under the controllers? Doesn't need to be big or anything like that. And every site that I've been at where a grower or an owner has done that, they said the best thing I ever did. Because it's right there. You can lay your clipboards for your logging, you can do whatever. Keynote on if you build this little bench under it, be sure the corner is rounded. It hurts otherwise. Okay? That's the little key. And it doesn't need to be but about 12 inches deep. A little deeper is better, but just enough so you can lay it down. The other one, and this is for me as a person who's asked to come in and something doesn't work, tell me why and fix it, is when you build a barn, put all the owner's manuals in a Tupperware tub. Okay, how many of you stood in a barn and you finally figured out you needed the owner's manual, and when you could find it, you peeled the pages apart and hoped the ink went with the page. And then you shook the mouse turds out, right? And hoped that the page you had. Put them in just a Rubbermaid tub out there so you can get to it. It saves an awful lot of work for down the road when you're looking for that kind of information. Here's another one. And I ran into this one last winter, these next two pictures. Dead pig removal. Unfortunately, our veterinarians haven't solved that problem. We still have pigs that die once in a while. And we use a variety of ways to do them. Many of you have bought the hog slat cart with the crank on it, and you tried it about 4 times and said, I'm not doing that again. And you're using sleds, you're using all kinds of things, snow sleds. This is the slickest one I've seen. That's just 1/4-inch slick plastic. Okay, and the latest version, and we didn't have one in the barn I was in, you round the corner so it doesn't catch on the gate when you're going down the aisle. And notice right there, that nylon rope is through a piece of 5/8-inch garden hose, so your hand doesn't burn. And this owner right there, his daughter, she couldn't have weighed 100 pounds. She was home from college, and she says, I can pull a dead pig down the aisle on that cart. They said they can get 5 of them out of a single 4x8 sheet of plastic. So you hang one in every barn. Or those of you that are deer hunters, $39 at Cabelas. Right? If it works to pull deer out of the woods, it ought to work to pull dead pig down the aisle. Anything to make it easier to do that is right here. So, nothing to do with benchmarking, everything to do with make your life easier. So, let's start with benchmarking. When I put this talk together last week, today was supposed to be cold. Well, next week will be cold. Okay, so you're all thinking energy bills right now, aren't you? It's the time of year. So let's talk about energy bills. I'm going to use a couple data sets and sources. This is Finbin, this is Minnesota Farm Business. These are numbers I put together several years ago on what normal bills look like. This is per pig, a wean to finish, per pig finishing. Separated 08 from 04 to 7 because there's a funny, we can't figure out why these numbers reacted the way they did. That one went down so much and that. But I'll look at it, and I'm going to give you some normals in just a minute. But the idea of we can get a handle on it. The challenge I don't know, especially back in 04 to 07, did you buy propane at $1.20 or pay $2 for propane? Okay, so dollars don't help me benchmark my production in terms of fuel use. Because I was hearing stories in August this year, if you bought tanker loads of propane at 99 cents, in spot market right now is what, $1.35, $1.40? Somewhere in that range. Quite a variation in price. So if I said your propane bill ought to be X dollars, I haven't helped you. Here's a look at those same numbers converted to per 100 pounds of gain, and assuming 250 pounds of gain wean to finish, that's per pig. Latta, Harris, Hanon, and Penningroth, we're going to use quite a bit of their data, is a CPA firm in eastern Iowa that does an annual benchmarking within their client base of about 300 farmers that raise pigs, including several sow units. So we're going to use a lot of their numbers with their permission today, and I'll get into it. But this is what they had in 07 as a normal, and if you compare it to what Finbin, that's $1.70, that's $1.50. We're in general line then as to it. Jay Harmon, who is the extension swine specialist, extension ag engineer at Iowa State, says in central Iowa, the rule of thumb they've come up with based on their experience, 2 gallons of LP per pig space per year for wean to finish. Okay? And I'd been using about 2.25 on the Iowa-Southern Minnesota border as a norm. And I'll give you some hard numbers in a minute. Some of you are involved in sow units. Here's a look at sow numbers. The good one is this data set where they actually broke it down, and it was 18 sites that averaged 3,800 sow. Okay, so that would be a sow unit, and that's what they came up in 07 as to what the bills were. So you have to adjust your utility upward because of what's happened to electric prices. Fuel oil and LP are probably similar to 07. We're paying pretty much similar prices right now. So $1.69 a pig for that category of expense is a number to think about. So what's normal on energy? Had the chance this past year to look at a lot of data from some large production systems on every site, what they spent on energy. And not only dollars, but use. So if you want to think about normal for northern Iowa, southern Minnesota, this will get you in the ballpark fast. Nurseries. You should use about 1 to 1.2 kilowatt hour per pig space per month. Okay? You should be 2.2 gallons of propane per space per year in terms of energy use. If it's much higher than those numbers, where's it going? Wean to finish, I said central Iowa is 2 gallon per space per year, 2.5. Even this far north in Minnesota. You get closer to the Iowa border where you're getting into tropics, it's lower. About 2.25 on the Iowa border is the number that you should be targeting as reasonable. And the reason that's important is I got a call a couple years ago from a site in eastern Iowa, and I couldn't get there when they called, but they said, we just put pigs in our wean to finish barn, Mike, yeah, whatever, and it's $8 a pig in propane. We think that's a little high, but we don't know. Okay, this is what normal looks like. Grow finish, less than half a gallon per space per year. Okay, 500 gallons then on a finishing barn a year is reasonable or less. Notice I don't have electricity in here because I can't sort out from the data sets that I've worked with tunnel from curtain barns. And there's going to be a clear difference in energy use between those, but I don't have a good number to put up there. So what's going to drive your energy bills above the 2.5 gallons of propane, above that? Absolute number one thing that does it is your controllers. You create the problem yourself every day. And what are we talking about? Minimum speed settings, your furnace offsetting in your controller, and in farrowing sites, the size of fan in the farrowing rooms. That absolutely will drive your bills through the roof. Let's talk minimum speed for a minute, because you're all going to go home tonight and look at this one. The idea in controllers, you all set your controllers for 50% minimum speed, stage 1, right? What are you setting when you set 50% on your controller? How many think you're setting CFMs? Anyone think you're setting RPMs? What about voltage? It's none of the above. It's a funny number, okay? And it's really important because you have to know how you told the controller what was connected to it. And that's called the motor curve, or motor compatibility in the Verifan. So in those controllers right there, I need to know a second piece of information. And this is what drives your fuel bills high. It will absolutely waste money, big time. That one change alone in your controllers will make a big difference. If you have Airstream TC5 controllers, which a lot of you in the room do, in the owner's manual was a yellow page just like this. I dare you to go home and find it, because the mice have been in it, right? And the pages are stuck together. But this tells you how to set your controller, so when you set 50%, you get approximately 50%. It's a bright orange-yellow sheet, looks just like that. Really important that you pay attention to that sheet. Let's go to the second one, because this is the one that when we think fuel bills now, we're standing in the barn, furnace is running too much. Ooh, that's money. Number one, we tend to put furnaces that are too big in our barns, right? Because we say we never want to freeze a barn. So we get a furnace, that even on the coldest day doesn't run a lot? The goal, if you have the furnace system sized right, is on the coldest day of the year, next Tuesday morning, the furnace just shuts off. It's big enough, doesn't it? If the furnace shuts off, it's big enough, isn't it? Right? So you're standing in a barn and the furnace runs along. Oh, I got to get a bigger furnace. That one's running too much. No, you want the furnace to run a long time. The longer the furnace runs per burn cycle, the more uniform the temperature is, isn't it? Because you have a stirring fan in the furnace. So you want the furnace to run a really long time every burn cycle. When you do that, you avoid overshoot, right? How many of you stood in the barn and heard the furnace come on, furnace shut off about 30 seconds later? What happens to the fan? Goes faster. If the furnace makes the fan goes faster, I want to be your banker, because you're going to use my money, right? I want to be your propane supplier is what I want to be, because you got overshoot, right? So, how many of you seasonally adjust furnaces to maximize runtime? Two ways you can do that. Every wean to finish barn, just about every grow finish barn I'm in Minnesota has 3 furnaces in a room, doesn't it? In September, when you start getting ready for the next turn of pigs in the winter, do you leave all 3 furnaces running? Or do you unplug the middle one so the outside 2 run a long time? When do you plug the middle one in? When the outside ones don't shut off. Till then, they're big enough. So your goal is to try and get your furnaces to run a really long time every burn cycle. How do you know if you get your furnaces set right? This is a key piece of information. You can use your controllers, because all of you generally are already using your controllers to log daily highs and lows, aren't you? You're keeping a sheet in the barn. If you're a contract grower, for sure, you're keeping a sheet high and low every day. When you're in full furnace mode, in a farrowing room, in a nursery, wean to finish during small pig stage, and you're in furnace mode, the daily high should never be set point. okay? Because if you have a TC5 controller or an Aerotech at 0.1 degrees above set point, what happens to the variable speed fan? Variable speed fan goes faster. So the daily high should be about 0.3 degrees under set point. I'm going to put a little buffer in there. If you have a Ventra where you can set ramp speed, the daily high should be about 0.5 degrees, a half a degree, 0.3 to 0.5, under the speed at which stage 1 ramps up. So you log the daily high temperature and the set point, or the temperature at which the ramp begins. And there should be some separation. If there isn't separation, what are you at? The risk of the fan coming on in response to the furnace. So you can use your controller to manage that expense. The other one, LB White Guardians. I bet 3/4 of the furnaces in this room are LB White Guardians, right? Got the blue valve. How many of you have ever touched the blue valve? It's amazing how many haven't. They all look like that when I walk barns. I can't touch that, it'll turn it off. Yes, you can, because right there's a sticker. If you clean it, it says this is not an on-off valve. September 1, every furnace in every hog barn that's a Guardian furnace should be on low. Absolutely 100% of every hog barn furnaces should be on low setting in September. When do you turn them to high? When they don't shut off. If they shut off, they're big enough. And you know how many furnaces stay on low once we do that? And the guy says, I never knew. Okay? Same issue with Farrowing rooms. You can buy this furnace here, which is a 250,000. You got 24 crate Farrowing room or even a 32 crate Farrowing room. Same price for a 250,000 because it's on sale today at Hogslat as the 100,000 or as the 60,000. Which one do you always buy? Because it's a better buy. The big one. I guarantee your fuel bill will go up with the big one. Because a 250,000 BTU furnace in a 32 crate Farrowing room overwhelms the room. You can't make it low enough. So there's benchmarking on that one. So let's get into what they actually asked me to talk about. Benchmarking. And benchmarking generally implies closeouts, right? We're looking backwards and saying, what did we do and how did we do? And benchmarking leads us towards statistical process control charting, right? Is the process in control? And generally at this point that has to be closeouts, and we use it for long term. The challenge is it doesn't tell us what's in the barn today, because we're making decisions here with the past. Today's is still, I argue, and many of you have heard me do this before, you know, daily use of water, some kind of monitoring of feed disappearance. We're moving towards that. Challenge we face with these of monitoring the growth process is we don't know how to intervene when it tells us it's wrong. It says it's broke, but we don't know how to fix it on the fly. We haven't got very good at that level of diagnostics yet, but it can at least get us there. And this one, the challenge has been, we've not had ways to put the information on the internet and then extract it back in the barn because of access, and a group of you are standing with me in the back. Smartphones, be it the iPhone or the Droid, suddenly you have a computer in your pocket and you have internet access. And in the future, you're going to be using that in your barns a lot for both data entry and data recovery, because it will be the internet interface out in the barn. So let's talk about cost of production numbers, benchmarking and sow numbers and all of that. I'm going to use several data sets. The one I've already mentioned is from Latta Harris and their user group comparisons. I get lucky enough to get invited every year to their wrap-up meetings and sit through the group and hear the discussions. As I said, they're in eastern Iowa, and their database then reflects mostly eastern Iowa, western Illinois producers. The Metafarms, as many of us are familiar with, is a production-based system. deals heavily with we use it a lot on sows and grow finish. Beginning to do some financial stuff, but it's in its infancy on the financial side. Finbin from the University of Minnesota, heavy on financials, but not very much production data. Okay, and it's publicly accessed, you just go and do your thing, and we're going to use some of their numbers. Finally, on the sow side for today, I'd ask Ron Ketchum to be part of the program. Ron is one of the owners of SMS, Swine Management Systems. They got about 1.2, 1.4 million sows in their data set now. He's up in Canada and didn't, but anytime you're going to see a blue slide, it's data that Ron furnished me from their record system in terms of what their client base looks like for numbers. So, and their website, that's the link to their website, okay? So I need to acknowledge all those sources of information. SMS does do some financial benchmarking. They have a small set, and this, Ron sent me this data last Friday, so they have a small set of farms that they do full financial reporting for. And they allowed me to share, so this is their numbers as of this summer in terms of what cost of production was on this smaller set of farms. So you've got the average cost per pig, per sow, and then an idea of what the range is. And as you can see, the range is huge. I don't believe anyone has a zero on taxes. I haven't figured yet how to do that one. So we probably didn't get it back out of the accountant in time to get included. Biggest one here, there's your utility bill, $1.50 a pig. And if I used, utility here includes fuel, and I was at about $1.60 on the data set I showed earlier. So that's probably a pretty real number as a target. Range from $1.25 to $2. You can go out labor, $5.50 a pig, range from $4.50 to about $7. You can see insurance, custom hire, and all of that. Feed cost, again, the big question is, when did you buy corn? And how did you price it? And unless that's standardized, any comparison is a bigger look at your ability to time grain purchase right now. Latta Harris, in their data sets, does it a little different. They publish two kinds of numbers. One number is their best estimate based on their client experiences and other sources of what the industry U.S. average is across the U.S. for both the 50th percentile and 90th percentile on cost. And then they also give their group numbers. So we're going to look at two sets of numbers from Latta Harris. For breed to wean, sow units, they said last year a year and a half ago, labor across the U.S., their best guess, averaged $5.90 a pig. For every wean pig produced in the U.S., that pig carried a labor bill of $5.90. The best 10% were doing it for about $5.40 a pig. The best 10% on cost of production were doing it for about $5.40. There's their facility cost and other costs, and they lump them all together as costs normally borne by contractor because they have some contract production, so they say if you contract it out for pig production, these would be the cost the contractor would have. This would be the pig owner's cost. So a genetic cost, a vet med, G&A, feed bill, interest. So they said the average in last year, about $40 to produce a weaned pig across the U.S. New, old. The good producers could do it for as good as $33. That probably did not include new buildings at that point to get that low, okay? And you can see I put the corn prices that averaged that year as a base. So, but they said last year $40 to get a weaned pig was what the average was. This is the way in their system they define that genetic cost number that's right here. This is what goes into their genetic cost and how they dealt with the tax implications involved because they depreciated out breeding stock. So it's a capital cost, breeding stock development. So you need to understand how that number gets in the data set. What impacts, why were there big differences in genetic costs? And it makes sense if you think about this one. Number one, if you close your herd due to PRRS, so you should close it down for 6 months or something, you're gonna have a low genetic cost because you show no expense for replacement during that period. You can load it with gilts and it'll be a big, and then there's nothing. And then, obviously, when you get ready and you start rolling a herd over, you're gonna get high genetic costs because you got all these gilts coming in, depending on timing of cull sows. So that's a big driver on genetic costs out there. These were the actual cost averages reported by their clients using their methods of reporting. And one of the interesting numbers is it appears down here that there is a slight benefit to size with about $1.50 a pig, that improvement, lowering cost if you're a larger sow unit than a small. But when they went back and looked, they said size didn't, it mattered, but on an individual basis you could compete. So we're not going to stand here and say you got to be big to have a low cost. But the odds are better if you're bigger because you got more animals to put some of the fixed expenses over. The odds are better of having a low cost. So, wean to finish, the area that I obviously spend a lot of time in. This, again, is their look at what's out there for cost of production. Last year, cost of gain was $46 per 100 pounds of live weight gain. Labor and facilities had that kind of range there. This is interesting. The huge difference in veterinary cost, wean to finish, and the biggest single driver there is when did they give the circle vaccine? Did the circle shot get given at the farrowing site and charged to the pig cost coming in, or did it get given at the finishing site and show up as a bill? That's the biggest driver of that difference right there, which I found interesting in terms of the discussion with the producers. Okay, lots of numbers here from Ron, and we'll try and point out. So this is a look at last year's data of the herds that are in there. So last year, they had 1.4 million mated females in terms of their data set. This is the average across all of the herds, 700 and some, almost 800 sites giving them data. They average per mated female, just under 25 pigs per mated female per year. The very best are getting close to the magical 30. You put PRRS in a site and you'll be one of the lower ends. Litters per female per year. Theoretical average, depending on weaning age, is about 2.66. We're getting pretty close. I mean, and what this says, as you start creeping this one up, right there, your wean to first service has to be getting low. You've got to have that one under really good control. Percent served by 7 days. Farrowing rates, and we hear this from many of you, some of you are routinely talking, 90% farrowing rates anymore. And he mentioned, I'm an old timer and used to be extension swine specialist, and we talk about 75% being a really good farrowing rate when we had sows outside in cargo huts, and now the industry average is 85%. Replacement rate, we're actually making progress. Several years ago, that was bumping 60% routinely or higher, and we're doing a better job of keeping females around longer in our herds. Just trends, there's the average. The top one is going to be the best, 10%, but the average, pigs weaned per mated female, man, that's a nice straight line upwards. Tells a nice story, doesn't it, of what we can do as a production industry in the U.S. in terms of progress. In their data set, the average producer, we've added 3.5 pigs per female per year since 2005. More numbers, born alive, obviously going up. Pre-wean survival, that one we still struggle with as an industry. Okay? You know, the average is still 15, 20%, again, depending on what you call born alive. Stillborns, pre-wean mortality, 11%. Agent weaning, and we'll look at that in more depth. They are averaging 20 days on their system. Their better producers are at 19. If you call better, more pigs per sow per year. Parity, and the average parity of culled sows. And again, the good producing producers are figuring out how to keep a female in the herd longer. That appears to be a consistent key when we're benchmarking in terms of getting pigs out. So there's a look at live-born. Should look that way on a lot of your farms, doesn't it? Just absolutely going up. Challenge we're facing out here, you start talking 12 live-born. I challenge that I hear a lot of people in the reproduction side talk about what have we done to be sure that female can nurse 12, to keep all 12 functional nipples, keep her fed and watered so that she can support the pigs to get them out of her. This is the US average. I threw that one in because this is people who care enough to take data. This is everyone. This is off the quarterly hogs and pigs report, and they do a number for every month. Pretty straight line, isn't it? Just absolutely remarkable on that one, how we have, for a 12-year period, we've increased that kind of production increase. Nothing in sight that says it's going to slow down. Pigs weaned per mated female, or per female weaned, 10.5, up there, you know, like the US number, going upwards. Farrowing rates, we mentioned that one, 5% increase over the last 7 years in terms of farrowing rate. Weaning age, we had the big conversion from 05 to about 08, and everyone was looking to get weaning age up, and that's when a lot of people, you know, because as an industry, we had a lot of people sitting at, as he said, at 18. A lot of people were at 17 or younger. Circle virus and that, we increased the weaning age, and we've kind of plateaued again. And this one's going to sit probably pretty steady, because for many of you, if you're going to try and increase the weaning age, you're going to have to either decrease female inventory or build more farrowing. And if you build more farrowing, that opens your permit, and you got to go through a zoning hearing. And the cap on this, on weaning age, is actually local zoning, in my opinion. That's going to keep us from doing more on weaning age with the inventory we've got. Because I don't need to go through the headache of hearing the people who disagree with me make all kinds of wild statements at a local zoning hearing. Even if I am successful, it leaves a bad taste in my mouth. So my prediction is weaning age is unless something comes in that's going to make us mandate to move it more, we're plateaued because of the constraints associated with our permitting process on that one. So let's shift. Notice I didn't spend a lot of time on the sow data. I hope you wrote fast, or you're going to come back and look at Ned's webcast, because I don't pretend to be the expert. What I am good at is grow finish. This is what I know. And I did this a year ago. MetaFarms put out a 3-year summary of what average looks like, using their methods of accounting and all of that. And part of another project, I said, how much has the industry changed? And this gets real interesting. So I went back in, and if you remember, Swine Graphics back in the 80s was going to be the record system. Al Lehman left the University of Minnesota and co-founded Swine Graphics, and was going to start keeping records and published yearly numbers that a lot of us used as norms. And PigChamp was doing a lot. So I went in those years and said, what have we done in grow finish? And it's actually a remarkable story, no less remarkable than the sow side. So we still put pigs in finishers at 50 to 55 pounds. That hasn't changed. It's just amazing, you know, come out of a nursery, 50, 55 pounds. But look at what we've done on weights. And we know this. We averaged in 87 selling a 235-pound pig in the U.S., basically. Why, how many of you would dare put a 235 on a truck to a packer today? You know, it'd be a lesson in futility. And you can see the change. We're right here, the 3-year data set from MetaFarms, 265 as a sale weight, and we'll talk about that. The interesting one here is look at what we've done on performance. I remember the very first set of pigs I did research on in the University of Nebraska and published. And they were wonderful Missouri commingled feeder pigs. At that point, 40% of all the pigs in the U.S., you know, commingled. And they had every breed and every worm and everything else in them. A 1.34 daily gain on a 334 feed conversion from 40 pounds to 240. And I sold them. My dad used to be a hog buyer. Bought hogs for Jacob E. Decker in Mason City and then Armour. Okay, and I called him. I'm standing in the hog barn and I called him, Dad, I'm getting ready to sell pigs and they weigh 240. Jesus, well, the language went, right? Them are big pigs, right? Now you would never do that. And it's there. 1.75 average daily gain. This number, I think this year is going to spike really big. What I'm hearing from a lot of you in this room is this winter, the closeouts on grow finish, a lot of you are above 2 pounds a day. If you don't have PRRS in a set of pigs this winter, a lot of 2 pound plus daily gains going on in the industry. Good corn, even if it is expensive, I think that one is remarkable. We've moved up that much. Feed conversion, again, huge improvements. When was the last time, for many of you in this room on Grow Finish, looked at a feed conversion above 3 to 1? You know, if it gets above 3 to 1, what do you do now? Something's wrong. 2.95 back in here, this is probably a reflection of our large use of DDGs. We adapted to that as a feed ingredient, or this number would have been lower. We still haven't figured this one. Disease is opportunistic. The minute we fix one of them, we got something else coming in. It's called self-employment for Paul Yeske and some of the members of the clinic, right? They will always have a job. And we need them, obviously, because we can't do it. And disease will always be there, but we're seeing this winter, again, with these 2+ daily gains, we're seeing lots of closeouts with death losses considerably lower, other than in groups with PRRS. So that's grow finish. Here's wean to finish. The same kind of wonderful numbers. The end weights, you can see when we took weaning age down, and now we're coming back up. Right? A 153, but it's not uncommon to see a 175 or a 18 anymore, wean to finish, show up on some groups. 267, even with distillers, a 25 showing in for feed conversions anymore. Death loss well under, total mortality well under 5% this winter if you don't have PRRS. Just remarkable in terms of what's normal and what the new normal is going to look like. So, a couple questions for you before we end this. Number one, because we now feed, we don't feed corn soy diets. When was the last time you were in a hog barn and saw yellow feed? For many of you, right? It's got DDGs, it's got cookie meal, it's got mids, it's got whatever helped lower my cost of gain. One of the challenges then is, why do we talk feed conversion as an absolute number? Because that diet isn't a diet in terms of concentration of energy. Well, PIC and the nutritionist K-State have put together a suggestion. One of the ways you can do that is think about reporting performance per unit of energy. Okay, at least get you thinking beyond that so that we can account for the differences in that diet composition. And you know, I've worked with some guys that have fed as much as 60% DDGs plus mids. And stuff comes out of the bin, so they feed it. You know, what's the energy content of that diet? Not real high. It's not a 1,500 kcal diet. It's some other. So they said this is what those two groups think should be approximately normal. if you have a good estimate of energy. This is the level when you do your summaries of, you better be asking why things aren't in terms of intervention level. So there's one look at a possibility. The bigger issue is right here. We record all our expenses and our performance, all the numbers I just gave you, on a live weight basis, right? Cost per 100 pounds of gain. When was the last time you got a check for your hogs on a live weight? Hormel at Austin doesn't even weigh the pigs, right? They just got a scale at the end of the rail. When will we begin thinking about feed cost per pound of carcass on the rail? Right? That's the number that matters. And you say, well, but yield and all that. The only time you need live weight is what? When you stand and look at a hog, put the blue mark on his back. The rest of the time, live weight is irrelevant to all our discussion. Okay? We need to be doing the math and thinking carcass weight. And the advantage of that one, and Mike Tokash emailed me back on something I'd sent him the other day, and he and I got into an email correspondence on this one. We know that as we increase the amount of distillers in the diet, yield goes down. The conversion of live weight to carcass weight goes down. For every 10% distillers added to the diet, yield is lowered about 0.4% because of a large visceral mass. Okay? When we worry about all of that, and you say it affects yield and all of that. Well, if you did everything on a carcass weight, feed cost per 100 pound of carcass weight, that yield problem would be self-correcting. You wouldn't care what it was. Because you'd say, what's it cost me to hang 100 pound of carcass? Period. And you wouldn't worry about if the feed ingredient changed yield or not, would you? You'd worry about it just being your ability to put the right pig on the truck. But after that, it's all taken care of in the record system. Have since learned in the last couple days of one large production system, internally, all of their internal benchmarking is on a carcass weight basis. So when their office staff, when they start talking production, it is on carcass weight. Because that is the only number that matters long term. Finally, let's talk carcass weight. This is a good one. At the Lehman conference this year, I was asked to talk about housing requirements for pigs to heavier weights. So I went back in USDA data set. This is USDA federally inspected Barrow and Gilt carcass weight over that period. You thought pigs per sow per year and pigs per litter was a straight line. This is a straight line. R squared of 0.98. We add 1.4 pounds per year to the average carcass weight in the US. And if you take this data back even further, it's absolutely there. Okay, have you ever sold lighter pigs one year following? You always sell heavier every year. If you follow this line, it says in 2022, 9 years from now, the US average live weight will be 290 pounds. Average sale weight. And some of you are way above that already, depending who you're selling to. That's a pretty big move. And here's proof. Here's further proof. This is Iowa, Southern Minnesota live weight at slaughter. Report comes out every Tuesday. The green dashed line is 2008 to 2012 5-year average. Those watching on the webcast, it's going to be the 07 to 11 average. 5-year average on carcass weight. Yes, we lose weight in the summer. Heat bothers us. There is 2 years ago, there's last year. Can you tell when corn got high and everyone tried to sell light? Right there. Guess what? We're heavier than last year. Okay? Second week of January 2013, we're heavier than last year. So what are we going to do? You're going to sell heavy, aren't you? Heat is a big issue. The big issue, as you well know, is, and I'll make the plea again, what are you doing in April to put in place management so this doesn't happen? because that's a huge loss in weight, isn't it? And there, you can have a whole discussion of the appropriate strategies beginning in April to help those pigs deal with the heat output so that you maintain that cell weight above that line. But the evidence is you will sell heavier pigs this year than you did last year, even in spite of today's grain price. A conclusion is the place where you got tired of thinking. I don't know if I'm tired of thinking, but I'm tired of talking. So we will end with this conclusion, you know, at least as a look at some numbers of what normal might look like and some thoughts on how we get those numbers.